I am Santa Esperanza, and for more than 15 years, I have dedicated my life to studying the hidden writings and mystical visions of the great saints of our church. This journey didn't begin in a library or a classroom, it began in a room filled with the scent of old rosaries and the crushing weight of grief when I lost my grandmother. She was the woman who raised me in the faith, my first connection to the heart of God, and when she left this world, I felt a void that no common words could fill. That pain drove me to seek answers in the diaries and revelations of those who spoke directly with heaven, because I needed to know if my tears were seen or if they were just falling into an empty silence. You are likely here today because you are carrying that same heavy why in your heart. You are looking at an empty chair or perhaps a photograph of someone who was taken far too soon, and you are asking, why did God allow this? Why did He take a person so good, so full of light, while others who cause so much pain remain? It feels like an injustice, perhaps even a hidden punishment, and that thought is a poison that can wither your faith. But St. Bridget of Sweden, a powerful mystic who walked the difficult paths of both marriage and widowhood, and who felt the cold skin of her own children as she laid them to rest, received a direct answer from the lips of Christ that shatters our human logic. The truth revealed to St. Bridget is that God does not take away those we love out of cruelty or neglect. He harvests them out of a fierce preventive love. According to the revelations in her celestial revelations, God often snatches a soul to protect it from a future spiritual fall or an earthly evil that the person would not have been able to withstand. Now He sees the storms on the horizon that we cannot see, and He brings His children home while they are at their peak of purity, ensuring their eternal salvation before the world has a chance to corrupt them. He uses this separation as a bitter medicine to wake up those of us who stay behind, reminding us that this life is a brief pilgrimage and that our true home is elsewhere. This realization is heavy, and even for a saint like Bridget, it was almost too much to bear. When her husband Ulf died after 28 years of shared life, she was plunged into a state of profound desolation. She had prayed, she had hoped, and yet he was gone. It was in this darkness that Christ appeared to her with a message that changed her mourning into a holy mission. He told her, her clearly, if so your husband had lived longer, his soul would have been in danger. Out of love for you and for his salvation, I took him at the moment of his greatest ripeness. Think about the weight of those words for a moment. We see the loss of years, but God sees the preservation of an eternity. We see a life cut short, but heaven sees a soul saved from a shipwreck we didn't even know was coming. This wasn't just a consolation for a widow in the Middle Ages. It is the key to understanding the empty space in your own heart right now. The person you miss wasn't lost. They were deposited into a secure vault where nothing can ever hurt them again. To truly heal, we have to look past the physical absence and understand the spiritual rescue that was taking place behind the veil. I understand that when your heart is heavy, mere words can feel like cold comfort. But I want to take you deeper into the very evidence that Saint Bridget of Sweden received when she was wrestling with these same shadows. I want to show you the spiritual architecture behind your loss, grounded not only in her profound celestial revelations, but in the timeless truth of the Holy Scriptures. This isn't just about feeling better, it's about seeing correctly. In the first book of her Revelations, Christ explained a mystery that often escapes our human eyes. He told Bridget that while we judge death by the stillness of the body, He judges it by the shipwreck of the soul it prevents. Think of the powerful analogy Christ gave her, the garden of God. He described Himself as a master gardener who walks among His flowers. When He sees a blossom at its absolute peak of color and fragrance, He reaches down and harvests it. He does this because He knows that if that flower remains in the soil just a few days longer, the scorching sun will wither its petals or a sudden rot will take hold of its roots. By cutting it now, He preserves its beauty forever in His house. This reveals that what we call an untimely death is actually God's perfect timing. He sees the spiritual decay or the worldly calamities that would have destroyed that soul's peace had they stayed. This is exactly what we find in the Book of Wisdom, where it says that the righteous person is caught up lest evil change his understanding. It's a preventive rescue. Even the prophet Isaiah warns us that the righteous man is taken away from calamity, yet so often we are too blinded by our tears to notice the storm God is sparing them from. For Saint Bridget, this became painfully personal. She didn't just lose her husband, she later had to watch her son, Carl, pass away while she was desperately trying to guide his spiritual destiny. It was in that moment of double widowhood and maternal agony that she was shown how the Virgin Mary herself was interceding for her son at his judgment. She realized then that a mother's love, as strong as it is, must eventually surrender to the far greater and more protective love of God. God does not take the good because he is finished with them. He takes them because he wants to keep them good forever. Sometimes he takes a parent so they do not have to witness the spiritual downfall of a child, or he takes a young person so they never have to experience a betrayal that would have turned their heart against the church. He is saving the best of them from the worst of this world. Now, I know the voice in your head might be arguing with this. You might be saying, but Santa Esperanza, God is omnipotent. Couldn't he have kept my loved one alive and simply protected them from evil right here on earth? It's a natural question, but we must remember that God respects our free will and the laws of this fallen world. Sometimes the only way to guarantee a soul's eternal safety without violating their freedom is through this repositioning. It isn't a failure of his power, it is the ultimate exercise of his mercy. Others among you might feel a sharp sting of guilt, thinking, if only I had prayed more, maybe God would have let them stay. But look at Saint Bridget, a woman of such immense prayer that she spoke with Christ face to face, and yet her husband died. Her prayers weren't ignored. They were answered with the highest possible gift, the secure salvation of Ulf's soul. Your prayers did not fail. They created the spiritual bridge that allowed them to cross over safely. And if this feels like a cruel gift, remember that even Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus. The pain you feel is human and it is real, but the medicine within that pain is the awakening of your own soul. This separation is a temporary pause in a conversation that is destined to continue for eternity. And when we stop looking at the empty chair and start looking at the hidden dangers they were spared from, the bitterness begins to transform into a holy, albeit painful, trust. You might be noticing certain signs in your own mourning that prove your heart is still stuck in the why instead of the for what purpose. It is in those quiet moments when you feel a strange envy toward families that are still whole, or when you feel that God was specifically unfair to you because the person who left was better than those who are still here. You might notice that lately your prayer has turned into a silent trial. You walk into a room and the stillness screams at you, or you find yourself scrolling through social media looking at pictures of other families, families that seem whole, and you feel a sharp, cold sting of envy. You start comparing the goodness of the one you lost to the people who are still here, thinking, gee, why them? Why is someone so mediocre or even cruel still breathing while my light was extinguished? This isn't just grief, it's a spiritual crisis of perspective. You are stuck in the why of the world, unable to see the for what purpose of the kingdom. You feel that God was specifically unfair to you because the person who left was simply better than those who remain, and that thought is a heavy chain around your heart. Saint Bridget teaches us that the first way to break this cycle is through the offering of grief. Eh, Instead of letting your tears simply soak your pillow in a cycle of despair, you must consciously gather them and offer them as a sacrifice of suffrage for their soul. Bridget saw in her visions that tears united with the intention of prayer actually shorten the road to heaven for the departed. Every time the pang of absence hits you, try to say, Lord, I offer this void for their purification and my own growth. But I know what you are likely thinking. You're thinking, but Santa Esperanza, God is all powerful. If he truly loved me, couldn't he have kept them alive and also protected them from evil right here on earth? It is a natural, logical plea, but we must understand that this world is a battlefield of free will. Sometimes the only way for God to guarantee a soul's eternal safety without overriding their freedom or the natural laws of a fallen world is this preventive repositioning. He isn't failing to protect them. He is providing the ultimate protection by removing them from the line of fire before they could ever be hit. The second practice is what I call the list of risks. Sit down in a quiet corner, perhaps in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, and honestly reflect, what earthly shipwrecks was this person spared from? Perhaps a long agonizing illness they didn't have the strength to endure, or a future betrayal that would have shattered their faith and turned them away from God forever. When we begin to list the potential storms they will never have to face, the gift of their early departure starts to reveal its merciful face. Yet you might argue, how can this agony I feel be a gift? It feels like pure cruelty to leave me behind. My friend, remember that even Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus. The pain itself isn't the gift, the awakening that the pain causes in your own soul is. This sorrow is a bitter medicine that peels our eyes away from the temporary and fixes them on the eternal. It forces us to realize that we are not built for this world, and that realization is what saves us. Thirdly, Bridget points us toward the Mass of Suffrage as a daily or weekly anchor. The Eucharist is the only bridge where the veil between worlds becomes thin. Yes, when you are at the altar, you are closer to your loved one than when you are standing at their grave, because they are in the presence of the Lord and the Lord is in the host. But then comes the nagging thought, I've lived a good life, I've tried to be faithful. Why did I need such a violent, painful call to conversion through this loss? Here is the breakthrough Bridget received. God doesn't just wake up the wicked, He purifies the good. Even Bridget, a woman who spoke to Christ face to face, needed the fire of mourning to fully detach her heart from the world and anchor it in the divine. This isn't a punishment for your sins, it is a refinement of your holiness. To keep your heart from sinking, incorporate the habit of the a secure deposit mindset. Every morning, look at their photograph and say, they are not lost, they are on deposit in the bank of God where no thief can steal and no moth can destroy. This shift in your language changes your internal chemistry. It moves you from a state of loss to a state of trust. You might still feel that if you had just prayed one more rosary or fasted one more day, God would have let them stay. But look at Saint Bridget. Her prayers were of a caliber most of us will never reach, and yet her husband still died. Her prayer didn't fail. It was answered with the highest possible security, Ulf's eternal salvation. Your prayer didn't fall on deaf ears. It built the ladder they climbed to reach the Father's house. Ozizib, we are now entering the heart of this mystery, where the pain of the absence meets the promise of the presence. The silence is no longer empty. It is becoming a conversation that will never end. And when we stop looking at the empty chair and start looking at the hidden dangers they were spared from, the bitterness begins to transform into a holy, albeit painful, trust. The transition from our earthly sight to heavenly vision is never easy, but it is the only path that leads to the peace you are searching for. If you continue to harbor this silent bitterness against God, you are doing more than just mourning. You are constructing a spiritual wall that separates you from the very peace you crave. When we refuse to accept the harvest of our loved ones, our grief transforms into a form of spiritual paralysis. You risk turning your loss into an idol, an altar of pain where you sacrifice your joy and your ability to see the graces still present in your life. The bitter medicine God intended for your awakening eventually turns into a cold poison that freezes your heart, making you blind to the needs of the living and deaf to the whispers of the Holy Spirit who wants to comfort you. Saint Bridget was once granted a terrifying yet transformative vision of the judgment of a soul that had recently departed. She saw the soul trembling as demons listed every hidden fault and every moment of lukewarmness, arguing that it belonged to them. But then Bridget saw the Mother of Mercy, the Virgin Mary, step into the center of the courtroom. Mary did not argue that the soul was perfect. Instead, she laid a golden weight on the scales of justice, the prayers, the rosaries, and the offered sufferings of those who loved that person on earth. Bridget realized that our mourning is not a scream into a void, it is a legal testimony in the court of heaven. If you spend your time accusing God, your seat in that court remains empty. But when you offer your grief as a sacrifice, you are standing beside Mary, providing the spiritual currency needed to bring your loved one into the full light of the vision of God. Consider the story of the widow of Nain from the Gospels. Jesus did not just happen to be at the city gate, he timed his arrival perfectly to meet that funeral procession. He raised the young man not to grant him earthly immortality, for that boy would have to die again years later, but to prove that he is the absolute master of the repositioning. He showed that even when a life seems cut short by human standards, it is only a pause in a much larger narrative that he controls with infinite precision. He returned the son to his mother to strengthen her faith for the eventual, permanent harvest that would come later. The Book of Wisdom reveals that the righteous are often hurried away because their souls were pleasing to the Lord. Imagine a father who sees his small child running toward a jagged cliff. The father doesn't gently call out. He runs at full speed and tackles the child to the grass. To the child, that tackle feels violent and unfair. Their knees are scraped, and they might cry out in anger at the cruelty of being stopped. But the father knows he has just saved their life from a fall they couldn't see. This is exactly what Bridget saw in her revelations. God tackling the souls of those he loves to spare them from a spiritual cliff, a future sin, a loss of faith, or a worldly calamity that would have destroyed their eternity. The world insists that death is an irreparable loss, a hole that can never be mended, but St. Bridget's visions reveal that it is actually a secure deposit in the bank of God. The world says they left too soon, but the halls of heaven ring with the joy that they arrived just in time. We see a tragedy of timing. God sees a masterpiece of protection. We see a life that was incomplete. He sees a soul that reached its maximum capacity for glory before the world could begin to drain it away. I know how difficult it is to look into this mirror and see a heart that has grown heavy with resentment. When I lost my grandmother, I wanted to argue with the heavens. I felt my life was lesser because she wasn't there to witness my milestones. But as I immersed myself in these mystical writings, I realized my anger was actually a form of pride. I was acting as if I knew what was best for her soul better than the Creator who had planned her existence from the foundation of the world. You are likely sitting there right now feeling the scrape on your own knees from God's protective tackle, wondering why the fall had to feel so violent. If you knew with absolute and divine certainty that the person you miss is currently standing in the presence of God, thanking Him for taking them at that exact moment to spare them from a darkness you cannot see, would you still ask for them to be returned to this broken and dangerous world? I know how much your heart still aches, and I want you to feel, perhaps for the first time in a long time, that you are not being judged for your tears. Even after 15 years of studying these mysteries, the human part of me still feels the sting when I look at my grandmother's old Bible. But as Christ whispered to Saint Bridget after she had lost her earthly world, do not say that you have lost them, say that you have returned them to the owner who lent them to you for a time for your joy. This is the anchor for your soul today. Remember the promise of wisdom. Their soul was pleasing to the Lord, and so He hurried them away from the midst of wickedness. You aren't mourning a tragedy of timing, you are witnessing a masterpiece of divine protection. To begin your restoration, you must first lay down the weapon of your why. Your first step is a prayer of honest confession. Tell the Lord you are sorry for the resentment you held against His harvest. Second, transform your passive mourning into active suffrage. Instead of just crying for them, pray for them. Bridget saw that our offered pain acts as a spiritual currency that accelerates their entry into the full light of heaven. Finally, find them where they truly are. Do not look for them only in the cemetery. Look for them at the altar. In the Eucharist, the veil is thin, and you are closer to them in the host than you are in your own memories. Now, I want to give you the specific remedy that Saint Bridget herself used to find her peace. This is a prayer of total surrender, a reward for your faithfulness in seeking the truth today. Let these words settle into the empty spaces of your heart. Lord, I offer you my loneliness as incense. You who know the end from the beginning, I trust that your hand took them so that nothing could steal them from you. May my pain serve so that I too may desire the heaven where they already await me. Amen. You stand now at a spiritual crossroads. You can leave this moment and return to the tomb of your bitterness, or you can step into the light of holy trust. If you choose trust, write "I trust your harvest" in the comments as a public act of faith. Give this video a like if it helped you breathe again, and share it with someone you know is struggling with a why that is breaking their spirit. Sharing this truth is an act of mercy. Make sure you are subscribed and have your notifications on, because in our next meeting, I will reveal how the saints describe the moment of reunion in the Father's house. God did not take your loved one away. He kept them safe so that your eternal embrace would be guaranteed. I am Santa Esperanza, and I will be here waiting for you in our next study of the secrets of the heart of God.